What is going on, guys? I'm Shock. Welcome back to the channel. In case you're new around here, I'm a multi-rank 1 challenger mid laner and played pro play for about 4 years. Today we'll be doing a Corki guide, and funnily enough, my highest ever damage gaming competitive was on Corki, so he's really fun. I really like the champ. I really recommend picking him up at the moment. He's extremely overpowered with the first strike build, probably top 3 champions in the entire game at the moment. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so starting off with runes, at the moment Corki has one keystone which is just far better than anything else. First Strike is just by far the best on Corki. It gives you a ton of extra gold throughout the game, and Corki's kind of a champion that's always struggled with having a really effective keystone. So now that First Strike is something that really works well with Corki, you're pretty much going to take it every single game. I will go over a couple other pages in case First Strike gets mega nerfed, but I don't really see it happening. So yeah, you want to take First Strike. The reason this is so good is because it really rewards like AoE and burst, which is what Corki has in spades. So it's really easy to kind of practice both in the early game, mid game, and even during the late game. It just earns you a ton of gold. I've seen some screenshots on Twitter of like 3,000 gold earned in a single game, which is absolutely ridiculous. Let's talk about these minor runes. So obviously, since we're going inspiration, we're probably going to pick up magical footwear. You could consider perfect timing, but the reason Corkin can kind of get away with this compared to other champions is first, you actually do have a movement skill in the early game, like you do have your W. So you're not super reliant on having move speed for just like dodging ganks and stuff like that. You could take perfect timing, but I think magical footwear is your greediest option, and you can get away with it most of the time. Then for these ones down here, you do have a couple options, but I do think Biscuit's Time Warp is overall going to be the best. There isn't something you're really like trying to rush on Corki, so Futures Market isn't super valuable. You could take Minion Demat and just get rid of like Cannon Waves. The reason you do that is because often it's a really good time for the enemy mid to roam on a Cannon Wave. So if you just demat those cannons, it can make it much harder for them to roam. But if you don't really know like how to use this really well, I would honestly just take the Biscuits. Down here, you could, I guess, swap this to Cosmic Insight if you really value the Summoner spell cooldown, but honestly, I think Time Warp Tonic is probably the best. It'll help you with your... Corki is like a really weak, like pre-level 6, like levels 1 to 6, or like 1 to 5, quite weak, and so having this for extra movement speed helps on a lot of the mid matchups, especially because a lot of the champions that counter Corki are kind of built around having a lot of skill shots. You know, it's like lots of mages and stuff like that that beat Corki. The time warp will make a big difference in those situations. So coming over to this, now we do have a couple options here. I'd say the default one is to take Resolve and actually to take Conditioning Overgrowth. This makes you a lot tankier throughout the game. It's a nice scaling option, and after you get through kind of the first 10 to 12 minutes, there's actually like it adds quite a bit of health and it makes it a bit easier to play. But there's a few other things we could do. So if you're against a really hard matchup, you could take Second Wind. So I'm thinking champs that poke you like on cooldown, so maybe like Airy Victor could be an option. You could take the Second Wind in. Alternatively, if you're versed in Assassin, you could take Bone Plating to try and avoid all-ins against champs like Fizz, Zed, just the champs that really want to like kill you 100 to 0. And down here, the only other option that's really could be good would be Unflinching for Tenacity, but I think you would probably take Cleanse if they had enough CC that you were like seriously worried about getting CC'd. One thing is Corki is that you do have quite a bit of range, so you don't need to be super concerned about just like CC that other champs need to be concerned about, because simply put, you're not going to be in range for it. So I think most of the time, this will kind of be the best. Now, if you're an absolute Giga Chad, you're a 10-foot alpha male, you can take Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. This gives you a ton of extra AD, but it is extremely greedy. But it obviously is like really good if you can like get out of the early game with this. So if you're in like an easier matchup, or if you're just an alpha male like myself, you could go this. Yeah, but you really need to be sure that you're not going to get punished for it. There isn't really anything else that I would consider taking. I suppose the only other things you really could consider is you could maybe go precision and get like attack speed and maybe presence of mind. But honestly, guys, I think you either take these mega scaling sorcery runes, or you go into resolve and pick these up. Now down here, this is pretty obvious. We want the attack speed, obviously, because you're going to put down a lot of autos in the early game on the creep wave, especially. It's going to help you stop from getting pushed in. AP, of course, and then either armor or MR, depending on the matchup. Now, if all you care about is like what's currently OP on Corki and what is like 100% the best, you can just skip on to the next section. I am going to cover a couple other keystones, but honestly, guys, this is by far the best right now. These other keystones will only be if First Strike is hell on earth. Okay, so assuming First Strike has been really nerfed, Electrocute used to be taken on Corki a fair amount. You can do a few things with this. You can either go the Electrocute tree with Inspiration Second. I'm not going to spend as much time talking about all the minor runes because I'm expecting the First Strike is going to remain the strongest for a really long time. Basically, the only other two pages that you'll use if First Strike ends up basically being removed from the game is if you're in a good matchup, if you're greedy, you can go Electrocute with one of these pages or the Resolve page. Or if you're in a really difficult matchup, you could go Precision with basically any combination of runes that you want to go for. Again, guys, not going to go too in depth to it. I really want to reiterate, First Strike is by far the strongest right now. I'm just kind of putting that in case it does get nerfed and you guys just have no idea what to do. At that point, look to take either Fleet Footwork or Electrocute. Okay, guys, so for Corki items, it's pretty much like Ultimate Bravery. If you've ever played that, basically, pretty much any item you build on Corki will do a ton of damage. It's just some items do even more damage than other ones. So let's get into it. So for your starting options, you have a lot of choices. I'd probably recommend most of the time just going Corrupting Potion with Time Warp Tonic. This probably gives you the strongest early game. It pretty much makes sure that you won't die, you have a lot of mana, you have a lot of sustain. But there are a few other options that are greedier. So you can go Longsword 3 potions if you want something a bit greedier than Corrupting Pot, but you also know you're going to take quite a bit of damage as well. So I guess like in a kind of like mid to hard matchup, like this is probably your standard like hard matchup or even medium matchup. But if you feel like you can be a bit greedier, you could go Longsword with 3 potions. Just put one because I didn't want to fill it all up. 3 potions. Other options you can consider is you can either start tier with 2 potions or you can start a cull. Personally, I think I wouldn't really start a cull anymore. I think the reason people used to start cull was because there wasn't really like that great other options to start. But I think now, if you want to be greedy, personally, I would start tier in 2 potions unless you feel like you need a bit more power in the early game, and then you go longsword 3 potions. But if you're not sure how the matchup goes, or if you're not sure you can survive, just go Corrupting Potion. I would say I go Corrupting Potion most games, but there are a lot of games where if you know the matchup's easy or you know you're not really going to get punished, that you can get away with the tier or the longsword 3 potions. Now for your early buys, it's going to again depend a lot on what you started. So if you didn't start a tier, it's really important that you buy a tier in the early game. Likewise, if you didn't start a Corrupting Potion, it's pretty important you pick up the refillable potion on your first base. These two items, they're very important. First off, because well, the tier is that no matter what build you do on Corki, you're going to build Mana Mune pretty much all the time, and you need to get this stacking up pretty early in the game. Otherwise, by the time you get to it, it's either not going to be fully stacked or it's going to be like really not even close to being fully stacked. Cull, it's kind of optional. I would say I would buy Cull if you don't have anything else to buy. Like if you kind of base on an awkward amount of gold, like say you've already bought these, you base again, you kind of, you know, it's between like a longsword and a Cull, you might as well grab a Cull. So for boots, I am assuming most of the time that you're taking magical footwear, but if for some reason you didn't, make sure to grab the tier 1 boots. It'll help you a lot, especially in difficult matchups, just dodging all the skill shots, and obviously it's really, really cheap. Now, Hex Drinker is actually going to depend a lot on what you're building later on, so I'm actually going to leave it for now, and I'm going to come back to it after we've talked about a couple of the standard builds. So for boot options, you really only have 2 choices, and I would say it's pretty much a one choice like 90% of the time. In 90% of your games, you should go Sork Shoes. They're so good on Corki, and you also have enough range that a lot of the time, as long as you play correctly, you actually don't need to worry too much about needing the defensive stats as much as other champs. Not only that, again, as we'll talk a bit later, but Corki actually has very good MR options anyway, so you don't really need to be attached to the Merc Treads. Honestly, probably the only time I would ever pick up Merc Treads is if they have a ton of CC, and for some reason I can't take Cleanse, like I just need TP for the matchup or something. But yeah, I think I've bought Sork Shoes in almost every single Corki game I've ever played, but I suppose sometimes you might find value in the Mercury Treads. But honestly, guys, it's basically Sork Shoes like 100% of the time. Okay, so for the standard builds, there are actually 2, but I think one is far better than the other. But there's some people that are still building the second one, and also, if this build gets nerfed, which I'm expecting at some point it will, then it'll probably be replaced by this build. So we'll go over both of them. Now we're going to talk about this Hex Drinker. So, in a lot of matchups these days, like very difficult AP matchups, you see people rushing Hex Drinker. And the reason for that is it basically means that you're not going to be able to lose that AP lane anymore. Like, they won't be able to all-in you. The MR is really good for trades. And now with this, you have some more options. So you can either build this directly into a Maw, or you can skip the Maw until after you've got a Ludens. So that's kind of, it depends how badly you need that extra MR. It's only 15 extra MR. I think the shield does get bigger though, right? Yeah, so the shield does get bigger, so I guess it really depends on how much you really need that MR. I think most of the time though, you can just get away with this Hex Drinker, and I wouldn't upgrade it to more until later on. So when we come back to these early buys up here, really you're only going to buy a Hex Drinker if you're planning on eventually building a more later on, and only if you really need it, because if you don't need this MR, you can actually just skip this altogether, so we can just take it completely out of here, and then you'll just build like this. And in fact, you wouldn't even build them more. So actually, if I just take these out for a second, if you feel like you don't need the Hex Drinker, likely you're building in this order instead. You know, probably this before your boots. But so what I'm saying basically is this is really dependent on how your matchup is. If you really feel like you kind of need the MR to survive, you need to grab it, and if you can get away with not buying it, then just don't buy it. Pretty much as simple as that. So for the rest of the build, whether or not you've built this, you want to go Man Immune into Ludens and then into Hydra. And then after that, you do have some more choices. Pretty much, you actually can buy almost whatever you want at that point. So once you've got those kind of those core items, I would say that if you don't buy a Maw early in the game, you probably should end up buying a Maw later in the game anyway. So you can probably assume that even if you don't buy a Hex Drinker, that you're picking up a Maw somewhere around here anyway. But for your last item, there's like a lot of choices you can do. So I'd say Void Staff is really good. You're going to be doing a lot of magic damage, obviously, and there's no point buying Last Whisper or anything, because Armor Pen doesn't do anything for you. It's actually Magic Pen, since you're mainly magic damage, especially with the Ludens build. So Void Staff can be a really good 6th item. Other stuff I don't have here, I'll talk about in the situational items, but pretty much for your 6th item, you can buy basically whatever you want. Void is good, GA is good. Anyway, we'll talk about it a bit more in the situational items down below. So next we have the standard build. This is what Corki has built for a long time, and it's also, some people still do this, but I'm of the opinion that this build here is just better at the moment. But if it gets nerfed, you know, a little bit, or if it gets nerfed really hard, we can expect to see this become the meta build. So in this build, you would pick up a tier early on still. You're definitely not just buying this later on. You do want to be buying a tier. And then rushing the Shield Bow. Shield Bow is a pretty good rush on Corki. It gives you lifesteal, which helps you deal with a lot of the difficult matchups. And obviously the shield is really nice for fighting in the early game, like skirmishes and stuff. And also just the other AD mythics aren't that good on Corki, because well, like Kraken, he's just like not autoing enough to make use of it. And Gale Force, like, you know, you never really Gale Forcing forward as a Corki. Or at least not any Corkis I've seen. So then, yeah, you normally pick up, you gotta pick up Rapid Fire 3rd, because you won't have enough crit if you're buying Man Immune to pick up IE 3rd, and then we go into IE, and then at that point, again, it's kind of like you can just pick up for your last item, an item that you need. It can be either more crit, like a PD or something. It can be a Bloodthirster, it can be a GA, stopwatch, you know, it can be basically whatever you want as your 6th item, just depending on what you need. It can be QSS. Again, we'll talk about that in the situational items. So for alternative mythics, like really guys, there aren't any other choices. I think at the moment you go Ludens 100% of the time. The reason is Liandry's is just not very useful on Corki. I guess maybe it could be useful against like really tanky teams, but Corki doesn't really have a dot or anything, like nothing that synergizes super well with it, so I wouldn't really recommend it. I think Ludens is definitely the best. Other AP items like Everfrost and Crown, you're kind of long enough range to not need to rely on Crown. And Everfrost, again, it's just like you're paying a lot for kind of like defensive stats and just like things that aren't damaged that you don't really need. Corki, like with his range, can be very greedy with his items. You can just build the highest damage items possible. Shield bow, again, we've already talked about the other competing AD mythics. There really isn't anything else to buy. So if you're going the first build, buy Ludens. If you're going the second build, buy a shield bow. That's pretty much it. But for situational items, we do have a lot of them. Now, in both builds, void stuff actually can be good, even in this build here. So the reason is, Corki does about like 75% or maybe even more magic damage. So if people are building MR, this can actually, it can be quite good. Like if they have a couple tanks, or if they even have one tank that you just can't kill, void stuff is going to be your way that you get like penetration, that you deal with tanks. It's also like reasonably cheap, 2800. Unfortunately, they did make it a bit more expensive than it was before, but it can be a very good 6 item in either build. The same with GA. GA is really nice because oftentimes, if people are getting to you, it kind of depends on what you verse, because I think you can make the argument sometimes that if you die on Corki, like if they did manage to get on top of you, you're probably dead anyway, like they are just going to be able to kill you again. But it does depend, because, for example, if they have only one champion that can dive the backline and they do kill you, but none of their teammates can kind of get to you, then after your res, you're actually going to be completely fine. So I wouldn't say buy this every game as your last item, but in a lot of games, it can be the best option. Now, Oblivion Orb can be pretty decent on Corki. You do have lots of AoE, so you can easily apply it to the whole team, and also you can apply it by poking, which can be quite useful, because oftentimes you'll like poke someone with a rocket, say, and they will get healed by a different champion, or they will lifesteal off a wave. So if you have this, it can kind of cut that down. It can make your poke stick a bit more before objective fights. So again, like, you kind of want to buy bigger damage items if you can, but if you find that you just need healing cut and no one else in your team is really getting it, then you could pick up the Oblivion Orb. Zhonya's is another one I have. So you actually can go Zhonya's as your 6th item, especially in the AP build. If you find that you really just need value out of this like stopwatch, again, you're against a champ like Fizz or Zed, and like the GA is not really doing much for you. You just really need that like invulnerability for a couple seconds, then Zhonya actually can be a good pickup. And I'll actually quickly say that stopwatch just on its own, you can buy this basically any time in your build, and it can give you one like really good fight. So if you use it well, it can just turn like one fight in your favor, which can often snowball into a lot more. So even if you don't intend on booting anything out of stopwatch, you can actually just buy the stopwatch in most games and get a lot out of it. More, we've kind of already talked about this. Again, buy this if they have a lot of AP, or if you're just in a difficult AP lane where you can't really survive without it. I would say that you don't really need more with the shield bow. I can't remember if these... Okay, yeah, you can't use both of them for a start, but I think also a lot of the reason that people do pick up this Hex Drinker is for the early game, like just for surviving. But if you are going this build, you will have lifesteal from Vamp Scepter anyway, so you won't really... Even if you're against a tough AP lane, you can probably just get away with a lifesteal instead, unless you're like really worried about being like all-in or something. So yeah. QSS, there's not many times I would buy this, and simple reason is that you're so long range that most of the time you're not going to need to worry about this. I'm trying to think. So like, what champs would you really care about? Like, I suppose Malzahar in the early game could be tough, if you just get ulted and you can't W away. But I think in team fights, like, there's basically zero chance you get ulted. I'm not sure I'd even buy it then. I guess the only time I'd really buy it would be against like Mordekaiser or something. If he just like flash ults you and you don't really have a way to do anything about it. Yeah, it's very rare that I'd buy this item, but I suppose every now and then, it has some options. Now, Death Dance. Death Dance is a pretty decent item. I've seen quite a lot of people pick this up on Corki. This can help you kind of fill in this build here. So, for example, if we decide we don't need that more or Hex Drinker, I'd say after your Manamune, Ludens, and Ravenous, you could probably fit in a Death Dance here. Somewhere like here. It's just a all-around kind of like good item. Helps round out your build a bit. So yeah, it can be a decent situational item, especially if you're not picking up the Mormon Mortius or anything like that. Stopwatch, we've already talked about it, so I think that's it for the item section. But to be honest, guys, the thing is with Corki, like I said before, you can build basically whatever you want and deal a ton of damage. But there are builds that will make dealing damage either easier, like this poke build here. Like, you'll have to fit in a lot of auto attacks with this build, whereas here you're mainly just like poking. It's a lot easier to play, in my opinion. And also, like, depending on what items you do buy, often they can make the game a bit easier for yourself if you buy the correct defensive items, and if you buy stuff like Hex Drinker at the right time. So for summoners on Corki, guys, really there's nothing to it. You're basically going to take Flash and then either TP or defensive summoner of your choice, like Exhaust, Barrier, Heal, Cleanse, one of those. If you really feel like you need it, I'd say most of the time Flash TP is probably the best. This will give you a lot of uptime on the map. It works well with your package, like you can TP in and package flank. It helps you just like farm a lot. It can help you with the hard lane. So I would say Flash TP most of the time. If you're in a lane though where you can get value out of like an exhaust or something versus an assassin, cleanse versus hard CC, those can be quite good. Or just the barrier heal to make team fighting a bit easier. I will quickly say I have seen a couple of times people run stuff like heal exhaust or barrier exhaust with no flash. You can do that, and the reason like Corki can do that again is because he does have that like big range advantage, and he has his W which you can kind of treat as a flash. But honestly, I wouldn't really recommend it. I think it's just a bit easier, a bit more forgiving to play with flash, and you don't get that much extra value out of these, I would say. So yeah. So now we have Corki's abilities. I'm going to talk just about these abilities here before I talk about the passive. So let's start it out. So first, his Q, Circular Skill Shot, and it does cost quite a bit of mana. In the early game, I would kind of just recommend to use this to kind of trade back. Like if someone tries to trade on you, you can kind of use it as a defensive tool. You can also use it to just like CS creeps in the pre-6. We'll talk about it again a bit more in the laning section, but generally in the early game, you just kind of want to use it defensively, but it does do quite a bit of damage. There really isn't too much to this, guys. It's just a circular skill shot that does damage, and that's how you're going to use it. Next is Corki's W. This is very costly, but it's a very strong ability. You can use it to get over walls. You can use it to get out of danger. It's very useful to pick this up in the early game to make sure you can either get away from like enemy all-ins or get away from ganks, anything like that. Next is Corki's E. Now this one's a bit interesting. It actually fires a gun in front of him and it shreds resistances. And interestingly, it actually doesn't if you're facing, it does damage when you're facing them. It's not just like if you cast it in this direction, for example, and then you turn around, it won't do damage anymore. So one thing you can do with this is you can move back and forth kind of quickly if you want to like move away but still like apply it a bit, but honestly it's not really that worth it. I'd say most of the time you're just going to be using this just in a general trade combo. The fact that it shreds resistances is very, very strong, especially because you deal mixed damage. Now, one thing about the E, which we will talk about a bit more in the laning phase, you actually can take E at level 1, and it can be a better trading tool than the Q. And the reason is, like, a lot of champs that'll kind of like die when you level 1, take Silas for example, they will actually have their resistances shredded. They were getting attacked by minions, and it also just like does a lot of damage. So if you're against a champ early that'll want to move into you, starting E can actually be good. Finally, we have Corki's ult. There's like 7 charges of this rocket, and they take, 12 seconds to recharge, and you also get to fire a new one every 2 seconds. And every third one, which you can see on this bar here, is going to be a big one. And that's actually pretty important. They do double damage compared to regular ones. And the way I like to use this is, well, obviously you want to poke with it, but I try and make sure that I have the big one like ready for a fight. So what I do is like, let's say for example that we're like, let's say I'm at 7. Then I want to make sure I get rid of ones to go back to the big one. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but basically, let's say I use this, right? And then we back out of a fight. What I might do is if I know we're not going to fight for a bit, I'll just fire off 2 random rockets to make sure that I have the big one ready. And then I'll just let them go back up. Obviously, if you're going to have a fight, you don't want to just be like spamming random rockets, right? But if you do kind of have the luxury of letting it recharge, just having your rocket ready, your big one ready, excuse me, is going to be really nice. So for which order you want a maximum, generally, I'd say if you're versus a melee champion, start E, and if you're versus a ranged champion, start Q. After that, you want to max Q, then E, then W, and obviously putting a point in R whenever you can. Take W level 2 if you need it, like if you're against a ganking jungler. If you're against someone that all ends, honestly, if you're just not sure, just take W level 2. So go either QW or EW. Otherwise, you can actually skip W until level 3 or even level 4, but it's a bit risky, guys, especially when your goal as Corki in the early game is kind of just to survive. but we'll talk about it a bit more in laning. Now let's talk about the passive, because I think this is a little bit understood. So the way this works is starting at 8 minutes, every 4 minutes, you can come to base and pick up this package. And basically it gives you a supercharged W, I'll just quickly show you, and it does a ton of damage. So anyone on this takes absolutely huge amounts of damage. They're also like kind of like pushed aside and slowed for a huge amount. Let me reset that and pick it back up. There's a few ways you can use this. Let's just show you. So you can use it to knock people aside in a team fight and they'll be slowed, and that allows you to easily like hit them with your entire combo. But most people know how to use the ability kind of like in a micro sense, but I want to talk about more like the macro sense. The first way you can use the package is that at 8 minutes, it does give you a free reset. So normally when you base, you're going to miss minions, but if you have TP, you can TP back, or if you base, right, and you pick up the package, you'll be able to kind of like get back on the map for free, normally without losing anything. So you can kind of think of the package as an extra TP. And another thing that happens is that at 8 minutes, the Rift Herald spawns. So if your jungler is like looking for this, or if they're looking for it, picking up package at 8 minutes can be a really good way to kind of like contest this and destroy people early. Like while Corki is like sort of weak in the early game, or like before his first item, while he has package, he is very, very strong. And that brings me into the next thing, which is that I see a lot of people really mistime the package. So you want to be picking up the package basically probably I'd say like 30 seconds from when the dragon is about to spawn normally. So what I do normally is I assume that Rift Herald's going to be taken fairly early. I pick it up at 8 minutes or 8 minutes 30, you know, when I'm kind of thinking this is going to happen. But from then on out, I pretty much only pick up package when like dragon is 30 minutes from spawning, because I know there's going to be a fight for it. Or I pick it up like when there's about to be a Baron fight. Basically, it's really important that you have your package ready for objective fights. Just picking it up randomly like every 4 minutes is definitely not the correct way to use it. So really try timing your passive with fights that you know are going to happen, and the easiest way to do that is just dragon spawning, or if they're like positioning for Baron or something like that. Since I've kind of given you all the tips and tricks on like how to use his abilities already, and Corki doesn't really have combos, I thought I'd do something a bit different here. The one thing you'll see of a lot of Corkis is sometimes they have really insane CS, and a lot of people ask like, how do you get CS like this? So you can see here, this is from a scrim I played last year, so don't worry about the item build. It was pretty different back then. But I have 300 CS, 312 CS at 26 minutes, and a lot of you guys will have never had anything close to this before. So I just want to quickly show you guys like kind of what I'm thinking and how I do it. I will say that maybe I'd need to do like a full video on this at some point. If that's something you guys are interested in, let me know. But I'll quickly just show you like kind of how to do it. So the first thing is obviously in the early game, you can't miss much CS due to basing. That kind of goes without saying. Basically, like you want to be basing at good times. Again, that's probably something I need to do another video about it. Maybe this is a bit ambitious, but kind of the core thing, I don't know why this is lagging. The core thing I want to like show you guys is that when you play Corki, you need to have like a farming pattern. So what I like to do as Corki is I like to think like where is my farm coming from? So mainly that's going to be jungle camps and sideways, because simply put, there's like you're not really going to farm the mid wave, and well, you're not going to farm many other places on the map either. So here's what I do. I normally go, okay, which side is closest to the objective? So right here, like all my team is top side, and I think like we've recently taken the dragons to the current objective is top tower. And most of the time you can think about like current objectives as like, is Baron up, you know, is dragon in 1 minute. So basically you want to be in the side lane that's nearest to the current objective. Then you want to be able to push that side lane in as far as you can. So here, because I'm in the like top side of the map, I'm pushing the wave all the way under the tower. And what this does is it gives you time to do other stuff. And that other stuff we do on Corki is pretty much farm jungle camps. That's how you get really high CS. It's about like, obviously you're going to make sure not to miss CS. Well, you can farm champions too, but basically you want to make sure you're not missing CS and that you're using your farm time really efficiently. So I pushed in the top wave, which gives me time to go and do this. And while I'm here, I'm able to take both these jungle camps, and this is plus 8 CS. And on top of that, after this, I can and go back to the top wave and I can keep farming it. And now I'll quickly say kind of like about that farming pattern is if you can kill the jungle camps like at the same time or at a similar time, that means that they're going to respawn at the same time as well. You really don't want it to be well, if you've ever played jungle, you'll probably know that if your camps all spawn um at really different times, you won't have like a really efficient path to go and clear through them all. But if, for example, every 2.5 minutes you kill the Krugs or whatever, you kill like, I don't know, Krugs and Raptors, and every 2.5 minutes, you can just go back and get the Krugs and Raptors. So see again, I keep this wave, I keep this side wave pushed in, and the only other thing I can really farm here is the Krugs, but I can't really go to them right now because Sejuani is already there, so we'll probably just skip forward a bit. Well, maybe not too much. So I managed to push in this wave again and take the top tower. So again, we're thinking about, we're pushing that side lane as much as we can. I will say I wouldn't recommend doing this in solo queue without TP because your team's just going to fight without you probably. But if you do have the vision and if you have TP up, which you should have unless you're like kind of wasting it, you should always be able to push this side wave all the way in, and it's quite easy to get most of the CS on Corki. Now, when the wave goes all the way in, as I've said before, this gives you a lot of time. So it means you can base without losing any creeps, which is quite important. Now, also gives you kind of the luxury of farming stuff on the way out. So you'll see here, as I path onto the map, the top wave is all the way over here. So I actually have time to farm another camp. So this is like, in the past, like 2 minutes or so, I've gotten 12 CS purely from jungle camps. And I think another question I'm going to get here is, like, when is it bad to take your jungler's camps? The Chad mid laner like myself will say never. You're playing Corki, really you should take all your jungler's camps, but, it's not a perfect world, and sometimes junglers will get angry. So I will say, if your jungler is near the camp, probably don't take it. Also, if they're just playing a really heavy farming champion, probably don't take them either. But if you can ever, kind of sneak them, you can get away with it, then I'd recommend taking them. Realistically, guys, like Corki uses gold better than just about every other champ in the game, so they should kind of be your camps. But like I said, it's not a perfect world. So again, skipping a bit forward. So we've gotten Baron, I've based, I've picked up a package. I picked up the package here because there was no other objective. We already got the drag here, I think. So you see, I path onto the side where there's 3 jungle camps, guys, and this is just Christmas for a Corki. You farm these so quick, especially when you've people are basing, or you have like a tank jungler. I can't believe I just gave that camp to a Lulu, by the way. But anyway, this is how you really get ahead of ahead of the clock as Corki, is you have like insane wave clear, which gives you a ton of time to clear camps and just like accelerate yourself ahead of the curve. And that is like one of Corki's big strengths. So I'd say really getting good at like using your time is a skill that like is important to playing Corki, but will also help you on a lot of other champs. Again, let me know if like this kind of requires a full video, because I feel like I covered quite a lot of stuff in the past 5 minutes and maybe it didn't make a lot of sense, but I wanted to kind of talk about it anyway. So laning on Corki depends a lot on what kind of matchup you're in. Mainly there are either like farm matchups or there are hard matchups. There aren't many matchups that Corki kind of goes even in. Either it's just like a free farm matchup, or most likely their current objective is just to survive. And that kind of what it is on Corki is your goal in the early game is really just to get as much CS as possible. So if you're in a farm lane like Corki Veigar, that means like just like farm as much as possible. And we'll go over some examples of harder lanes later. But yeah, most of the time, it's going to be very rare that you kill your opponent. You'll just be looking to farm. So the way to do this in the early game is mainly to try set up like good bases and try set up good bases as well as like good kind of like wave manipulation. So when I'm against Veigar here, I can't like harass him with Q a little bit, but I know there's no chance that I'm really ever going to kill him. So I'm just kind of using my Q to like push the wave at the same time. Like you'll see every time I go for him or every time I'm like eating him, it's always pushing the creeps at the same time. You also see here, guys, that so far I have perfect CS, and that's really important on Corki, is that you are getting all the CS. You scale so insanely hard, and it's really important that you aren't just like missing CS for free, especially in the harder matchups, because in the harder ones, you are kind of gonna lose a lot of the CS anyway. So as you can see in these like farm matchups, it's like really easy for Corki. All you really need to do is kind of like keep the wave in the middle, either to where you can't be harassed, or push it under the tower so that the enemy can't really see us. Now, once you get to level 6, that's when you really get some like agency in your lane. Once you get your ult, you can start like poking with it really often, and you actually can look to sometimes kill your opponent. So yeah, once you get this R, you basically want to be poking with it on cooldown. If possible, you want to kind of like splash it off the creeps. It makes it a lot easier than just aiming at them. So the way I normally do it is if they stand too close to the range creeps, it's a really good opportunity to kind of like hit them with your R. But you'll see here that I'm still like pushing the wave in. That'll mean he doesn't have creeps to hide behind, and then I can start just kind of like firing rockets at him. And you actually find that in a lot of the matchups, even the hard ones, basically your hard matchups become like even, I'd say, at level 6, and your your farm matchups become like really easy after level 6. And that's mainly because like if you're in a hard matchup, once you hit level 6, it's really easy to just start farming with your rockets. And if you're in these easy matchups against these other farm champions, normally you can kind of just like push them under the wave, and a lot of the other farming champions don't have sustain, so they'll be really vulnerable to your poke. So now let's look at how you manage a hard lane on Corki. So this game, I'm playing Corki versus Aurelia, which is pretty much the hardest matchup you could possibly play. I'd say I'd even prefer, cock and ball torture to playing against Aurelia, and maybe some of you guys would just prefer that anyway. I'm not judging, but so basically in these matchups, when you're against these really difficult matchups in the early game, you really want to try and keep the wave like outside of your tower. You really don't want to push. And actually, one thing I didn't realize at the time was that if you toggle target champions only, sometimes it actually hides the health bars on your creeps. So in this game, I was really confused as to why I couldn't see the health bars on my creeps. So yeah, when you're in these hard matchups, you want to try keep it at your tower, but eventually it is going to bounce back. And what you want to do then is when the wave does start pushing out, is you want to really hard push it out. You want to push it out enough that it's like difficult for them to hold, and also because you just don't want the wave outside of your tower. The only way you really get all in is if the wave is kind of like in the middle or on their side. So if you ever do get that opportunity to just like fast shove out the wave, that's really good. So again, you'll see here, the wave is coming to me, and I'm going to try keep it here for as pretty much as long as possible. Again, you don't need to do anything early game as Corki. All you need to do is farm as much as possible, and if you're in a hard matchup, just survive. Basically, you're just like, what I'm doing here is I'm just keeping the wave outside my tower. I'm like thinning it out so it doesn't full crash, and that's just like making me safe here. And you can actually see I'm willing to trade my HP to actually tank this wave. And the reason for that is I actually lose I'd lose less if I can like keep it here. Although in this situation I actually started pushing because I realized my bot lane was getting dived. But I actually probably should have held it. Like you can see the Aurelia came back. It was probably a mistake, but you can see what I was doing. Something you guys can definitely do is if you pull the wave, like it was actually dumb what I did here. There's really no excuse. I should have just like not done this. Because if Aurelia went bot right, she would have lost the next wave, and if she stayed, it would have been here. Ultimately, I don't think it mattered, but yeah, definitely a mistake either way. So yeah, if you can keep that wave kind of in that situation, you'll see here, I'm not going to auto it too much. I kind of like where the wave is right now, although, again, if I hadn't cleared it out, it would have been even better. But now that I'm level 6, I'm not too worried. Again, like I was saying before, once you hit level 6 as Corki in these difficult matchups, any creep that was kind of like out of reach before, you should just be able to ult to get it. Just, like, there'll sometimes be creeps that are just like way too far, and it also means that when you do, again, like you can see the wave is bouncing back out here, it'll make it easier just to kind of like burst the wave down and get it shoved all the way in, as you can see I'm going to do here. Ultimately, there isn't too much to Corki's laning phase, and that's not because like laning phase doesn't matter, it's just like less important than it is on other champs. Really, you're just trying to get as much farm as possible without dying. Once you're level 6, you actually can apply a bit of pressure. I will actually quickly say, when the wave bounces out, sometimes you will see the wave frozen like this. If this happens, there's not that much you can do about it on your own. Simply put, you're a weak early game champion. If people are playing well, they will freeze the wave. The best thing you can do here is like call your jungler or your support to try fix it, and if they don't, sometimes you just got to accept it. But honestly, guys, if you're down 20 CS as a Corki to an Aurelia, like you're far ahead. Believe me, you're far ahead. So when you team fight as Corki, there are a lot of things that like you need to think about. The same on Corki as you do other champs. So for example, when you team fight, you need to play on your range. You need to make sure you're kind of like you're not, melee ranging the enemy like tanks or the enemy like bruiser or something like that. And it's also good if you play behind your team, but we'll show some examples of that. But something that I think is quite specific to Corki or to poke champs in general is you really need to be using your poke before the fight to get some sort of advantage. I guess Corki is a bit different from other champs like Zoe in that he does provide some sustained DPS over the fight, but normally when you have a poke champion like Corki, you can generate so much value before the fight even starts by landing poke onto key members. And I think that's very important as well, is that poke onto squishies or to carries is generally a lot more valuable than it is onto tanks. Obviously, like if you can poke their tank really low, it does make a difference, right? But if you can get kind of poke onto, I'd say just like quality or high value targets, it does make a big difference. Another thing is that similar to other like sustained DPS champs, a lot of the time you will be hitting the target in front of you, but because of your rocket's range, a lot of the time you can actually be hitting someone that's close to you while also firing rockets at someone else. And I'll actually show that here. So you can see I'm DPSing this Lee Sin in front of me, right? But I can also see that there are these two squishies bunched up over here. So you'll see while I'm DPSing this Lee Sin that I actually look at them. And if you look at my position here, guys, I'm positioned like with my team. I'm not I'm not where Akshan is. This would be a really horrible spot for Corki to be in. And you can see just like how much damage that does. Like if I just go back a bit here and see, while I'm DPSing this Lee down to like half health, I also just like land a rocket that one-shots Janna and like half health the Varus. Quickly showing you guys another example of this, of how important it is to land that poke before a fight. I see here these two grouped up guys. Even though poke on Riven isn't super useful because she does have lifesteal, I believe, poke on what's his name, Veigar is very useful, and you can see I chunked both of them to half HP before this fight even started. So that's kind of the power you get from Corki, is that oftentimes you can essentially decide the fight before it even starts if you land poke onto kind of like key members of the enemy team. So next, I'll show you guys a few examples of how you want to team fight with package, because it's very different. But as I was saying before, you generally want to be like behind your team and poking and looking to win the fight kind of before the fight starts, because Corki's a poking champion. But the thing is that Corki's passive is so OP for team fighting, and it's really important that you get good use out of it. So there's a couple ways to do it. Generally, as before, you do want to hit it on high value targets. So in this game, this is a pro game I played in 2020 in the final. Top damage, 1,116 damage per minute, by the way. So in this game, the kind of two biggest threats are this Victor and the Aphelios. Vladimir is a threat as well, but you can see he's like down flash and down ult, which I knew at the time. So he's not as big a threat at the moment. So it's really just these two here. So the two ways you can use your package are, you can be the first engage, but it is a bit risky. So if you're the first engage, you need to be very careful of just getting bursted when you go in. And also you need to have a way out. So I'd say if you can avoid being the first engage, you should, but a lot of the time you will have to be. But ideally, you follow up other CC. So you'll see here, I'm holding my package, I'm just poking, and then when Malphite ults this carry, I immediately W in on him. And so you'll see here, my W, the package hits the Aphelios, it hits the Trundle, and it also hits the Victor. Like you can see, it pushed him aside here. So the team fight was just so easy. I don't think I ever saw like a damage graph for this fight, but I think Misfortune and I would have done like 5,000 damage each in this fight. So it's pretty crazy, like how easily package can turn the fight. So I think like I was saying, like saying it for objectives, and if you can, like following up other people's CC with it, is really good. I'll show you guys an example from another team fight. And I think this team fight I didn't layer with any CC. So you'll see here, I noticed that kind of like there were a lot of people like in a line here where I could hit them all with my package. So here, when the Vlad, Thresh, and Victor, which is one of their big threats, were all lined up, I decided to package over them, as you can see here. And you'll actually see that the Victor almost completely dies just to the package. I guess I hit a rocket on him, but he was dying. And actually, Aphelios flashes into the package as well, if you notice that. And he also gets like completely burned down by that. Actually, yeah, look at that. So I'm pretty sure this Kindred doesn't even hit him, and Malphite's not doing any damage. He literally just died to my package there. So the way you want to use package to summarize is you kind of want to follow up CC if you can, but if not, you're just looking to kind of hit as many targets, hit as many high value targets as you can. And I think one thing that is sort of important is you do need to think about like if you can get bursted or what kind of cooldowns they're going to hit you with when you come out of it. There's no point just like Wing in if you instantly get one shot. So it is something you need to think about a little bit, but it's not too hard to do and it's like really fun. You'll love doing it. So the last thing you might be wondering is how do fights play out when you don't win a fight kind of like with poke beforehand and you also don't have package, so when it's kind of just like a normal like team fight with nothing else around it. In that case, you kind of want to play just like an AD carry, except you have a bit more poke. So you'll see like in this fight, generally I'm trying to like make sure I'm like with my team, like kind of being behind your team like a traditional AD carry is, and just going for a lot of auto attacks. Obviously I'm shooting rockets when I can, but you'll see like I'm doing a lot of auto attacks onto their tank, and then trying, if I can, to like fire my poke onto their squishy targets. So when Corki, like when you don't have your rockets, when you don't have anyone to poke, you are just kind of like filling that AD carry role of like you want to kite back, you want to like keep yourself alive, you know, just like a traditional AD carry really, except you just have nuclear bombs on your ultimate as well. Show you guys another example really quick from the same game. So this fight, again, the entire enemy team is at full HP, like no poke has been landed beforehand, and I don't have package. So again, the way I'm going to play it, I'm going to stay behind my team, behind my tanks. If I can, I'm going to try to get poke on their squishies during the fight, but otherwise I'm just going to be hitting the target in front of me. So you see I'm able to get a rocket on their backline there, but otherwise I'm just like kind of hitting whoever's in front of me, which happened to be that Elise. Yeah, so that's basically what you want to do. I think importantly, you don't want to put yourself in danger. Because Corki has high burst, it's easy to think that like if Corki gets off his combo, he's kind of like, he's done, right? Like there's a lot of champions like where they fire off their combo, and then if they die after that, it's kind of fine. But the thing is on Corki, like Corki has a ton of burst, he has a ton of sustained damage as well. He just does ridiculous amounts of damage. That's really all there is to it. Team fighting is Corki. Team fights very much like other mages or other AD carries. I'd say the three most important things are, there's like three stages. So before the fight, kind of like the pre-fight, you want to like land poke onto important targets, and you kind of want to position in a way that you can like find that poke before the fight starts. The second thing is this: if you do have package, obviously try like time it around like objectives and stuff. But if you do have the package, really try either follow up CC with it, or you can be the engaged, but make sure you don't get bursted if you are engaging. And try hit it on those like really important targets, the AD carry in the mid normally, and kind of like plan a way to get out. Like if you go back to the clips, you'll see I like W in, and then I normally have a way to W afterwards. And obviously the more people you can hit with that, the better it is. And then finally, if you don't have either of those things, if it just comes down to like a normal team fight, really all you want to do is during the team fight, you just hit the target in front of you while staying behind your team, and then if you can, try fire rockets at their squishy members. I think that's very important. You'll see in a lot of those clips, if I quickly go back here, even when I'm hitting the target in front of me, I'm looking to fire the rockets at the squishy. So even though I'm autoing this Elise, I'm firing the rockets into the backline, you know, while this Elise is in front of me. So I think that's really important. So Corki's matchups, I've actually deleted an entire tier, which is the easy tier, and I feel like this kind of needs some explanation. We talked about it a bit before, how the way Corki's lane works is there are basically these free farm matchups, which I'd say are the ones at the bottom, and then everything else, Corki is kind of going to struggle with to a degree, but there's a lot of these, which I'd say, if you play correctly, you can like neutralize and then outscale. So to give some examples, like there are champs, I think, you know, like, okay, so let's say like champs like Orianna and Syndra, for example, they will punish you quite hard in the lane, but in team fights, you can actually do pretty well into them, because you like outrange them, and you outscale them damage wise. But in the lane, they are going to be quite difficult. But if you know you take the right runes, so for example, you take like against Syndra, you take like Time Warp, you take Second Wind, you keep the wave close to your tower, you rush a Hex Drinker, you know, stuff like that. If you do all the right things, I can see this being like in the skill thing, you know? For me, like the matchups in Corki, almost all of them are going to depend just on how good you are at like managing your lane, I would say. The ones I would say, the reason I've got some of these ones in the harder tier though is because not only do they win lane, like Victor does, but they also scale really well. So like your scaling advantage over Victor isn't as crazy. Like I'd say Victor probably out damages you in a straight 5v5, But again, you have like really big poke advantage, and I'd say it's a bit easier to play Corki in a team fight. So I don't know, like looking at this, even though I made this just now, there's some that I sort of like disagree with. Like, would I really consider Victor that hard? Like, yes, the lane is very difficult, but if you manage it well, you can come into team fights, sort of okay. It can actually be fun. And it's sort of the same with these assassin matchups. Like, yes, Zed can be very difficult. Same with Aurelia, but a lot of the time, like if they don't get a big lead, you're just going to be really, really far ahead of them. So I'm tempted to say that basically anything hard and below is actually a skill matchup. It's just some of them are going to kind of require like more skill than others. But there are very few matchups that Corki straight up wins, but there are also very few matchups that Corki can't neutralize, which is why in competitive right now he's such a good blind pick. I will say that Kassadin and Yone are very, very difficult to neutralize. The first reason is Kassadin, he scales just as well as you do, and he like trades very well into you. He's kind of like weak at the same time as you are, so even though like you've got a weak pre-6, so does he. You can't really punish it. He can't punish you, but then he just like trades well into you after 6. And sort of the same with Yone. So these are the only two champs that I'd be like really, really scared of versing as Corki. I think anything else you can like learn to neutralize, but I'd say with a lot of these champions, it can be useful to kind of like watch a VOD on them, or it's just like a general test of like how good your laning is, but it's like, how forgiving, I guess, is more like the right word. Like these champs in the hard tier, they're not going to be very forgiving if you make a mistake. But if you don't make any mistakes, you can actually deal with them kind of well. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Corki's laning is very different from other champions, so it's sort of weird to have like a matchup tier list for them, but I hope that sort of helped. So guys, that's it for this one. I actually feel like even though I'm quite good at Corki, I kind of struggle making this guide, honestly. I hope it was helpful, like regardless. I'd say just the reason is Corki is very, very different to other champs, even though he's very simple. He's like a much different play style. A lot of the other champs, you're very aggressive in the early game, but Corki is like he's a neutralizer, and he's like a poker, and you're not really like all-inning and stuff like that. So he is, I'd say, pretty different from most of the other mid-lane mages, but I guess it just like depends on what you play, right? Like if you play a lot of assassins, he's really different. If you already play champs like Lux and Xerath, you're kind of like used to playing like this, I would say. That being said, Corki does have like some complex stuff to him, but I've tried my best to kind of explain it all. If you did like the video, make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any questions, make sure to leave a comment. I do try and answer just about all of them. Unless you type something really stupid, I probably won't reply, but yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, boys, and I'll see you guys next time.